I am Scott Shellady, also known as the Cow Guy. And we now have 4 Fed heads talking about interest rates being higher for longer. And now we also see the Fed testing the market with a few reports about a new terminal rate or neutral rate, because some large market participants are laying bets that that rate could be 6%. It could be a new target. So we now have both the market chatter and exchange action suggesting that a much higher terminal rate might actually happen. Now, JP Morgan's CEO, Jamie Dimon, says he too sees a case that the Fed could raise rates above the 5% level they talked about earlier. He added, it's way too soon to declare victory against inflation. But the market just doesn't want to believe it. We have the Fed and a large investment bank openly debating data that seem to be widely disregarded by those in the investment community. And we know one person we'd like to hear from on these issues. Please welcome to the show, Rebecca Walser, president of Walser Wealth Management. Finally got you back on. Thank you very much for showing up today, Rebecca. It's interesting that they're starting to push that out there a little bit to see what the market thinks about, hey, we might have to raise these things higher.
You know, this is not a shock to me, Scott. I looked at some analysis last year that really said the Fed funds rate should be between 5 and 7 if they were really going to correct the over stimulus that we got through COVID. And so for me, I knew them saying, oh, it should be around 5 was them easing the American public into what they knew would ultimately be a longer game to play and a higher rate to achieve.
And you know, it happens every weekend if you're out in a bar at a party or whatever, and you talk about, hey, I don't think the economy is doing too well. And then people just throw these jobs numbers right back in your face. And the one that just kills me is obviously we got that 517,000 a week ago today. But you know what? We're nowhere near getting the inflation rate down to 2%. And as long as that's the case, nothing else matters to me.
Yeah, and we're in this weird dichotomy, Scott, where we get these good employment numbers, but everyone else knows the economy is not doing well, and they're hearing these headlines of all of these tech giants laying off thousands and thousands of workers, and they're not jiving. And so even the BLS numbers, I mean, you and I have talked about this skepticism of the official data, but I can tell you that we really lost 2.5 million jobs in January or in December. But what actually, golly, I'm losing my mind. In January, Scott, we really lost $2.5 million, but what they did was they seasonally adjusted the 3 million jobs that came in. So that showed a gain of 517, but that is just wordsmithing. And you and I know it, and the American people know it. But what it's doing is it's doing what it's intended to do, which is to give the Federal Reserve continued reasons to keep the rates going higher for longer. Because Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve understand they have caught themselves into a corner, a rock and a hard place. They must keep the dollar strong. They're doing that by raising rates to tap down inflation. Yet they also have stopped stimulus, and they're actually obviously selling off their balance sheet. Right. So running off the balance sheet, raising interest rates, drying up liquidity. By doing all this to correct inflation, they're actually bringing about potential economic destruction. We've talked about this demand destruction, all these things. But they know they have to be somewhere into 5 to 7. Now they're saying 6. No, Scott, they're going to come. We get to 6. They're going to say, well, really, it's 7. And honestly, we'll probably have an economic disruption before we ever continue this year. We will see some major economic disruptions this year, unfortunately. I'm so
on board with you with that. And another thing that is starting to bother me is because, and it might give the Fed more power, like the 517 jobs did, is they're going to redo the CPI number. And you know what? They're not going to redo the CPI number to make it go up, are they? I think that we're going to get CPI next week, and it's the first read we're going to get since they revamped it. Now, they're not just changing definitions anymore. They're changing derivations now, and they're getting different numbers. So I reckon we could see the CPI number come way in, and that'll also, I mean, that's going to also give folks like me a pause for concern, because we need to have a big reckoning out there. Numbers aren't jiving up.
That's it. And I think people are scratching their head and saying, this doesn't add up. And a lot of people, I mean, I know some commentators on other news podcasts actually say, you know, these are terms that the Republicans introduced into the lexicon of American culture. I'm sorry, people are just not dumb. And they're waking up and realizing how much eggs are costing, where the meat is going, what is happening to our lifestyle? How come there's so many job openings and so few workers, yet we're supposedly laying off people, I mean, it's just such a dichotomy of different factors, Scott, that people cannot wrap their head around tails. And top to bottom, the market does not know what is coming. That's why one Federal Reserve comment or one jobs report number can whipsaw us up, positive for 3 days. We can have, basically one tech giant come out with some positive earnings, Meta, and sit like on a mini NASDAQ tear like we saw in the 2000s for 3 or 4 days. I'm telling you, the market does not have a sense of itself, nor could it in these circumstances.
Real quick, everybody wants to hear what your thoughts are on this balloon. That was a disaster. But where do you stand about what's really going on up there?
Scott, this is, I think that they're trying to make this a little bit of a joke, but, I can tell you from the Chinese experts that I listen to that make no mistake about this. This is a multi-continent front attack. And not an attack in the sense of, an assault, but an attack in the sense of a data stealing attack. And we had it happen because exactly what Joe Biden said last night as the president of the United States, that it wasn't that big of a deal if they gathered some intelligence as they transversed, and they've gathered some communication as they transverse our country. If you have a presidency that is willing to allow a balloon to transverse that they know has the capability, the satellite capability to retrieve our personal American information and flying over military bases, and that is your response, then that is exactly why that country did that. And if you look at China, we know from civilian reporters on the ground, so not reporters, but civilian operations, that they have been asked to switch distribution and manufacturing from a consumer-based, manufacturing to weapons-based military manufacturing. So China has definitely made military moves. Right. It looks to me, and it looks like to the experts, that they are preparing for war. And if our president is going to have that much of an apathetic response, we're going to see these balloons peppering the sky, and then we're going to see other things coming down too. It's not good, Scott. This needs to be taken seriously.
We have Space Force and now Balloon Force, so we'll see what happens. I appreciate you very much, Rebecca. Have a great weekend. Thanks for coming on. You're a fan favorite, Rebecca.